The War of Three Dooms was one of the most devastating wars ever in the world of Ichoros. This conflict spanned across multiple realms and saw the use of apocalyptic magic weapons called allabons, which annihilated life on a mass scale. The Three Dooms is a reference to the three realms where allabons were deployed: Jaya, MacLeod, and Dreckengrim. The preconditions leading up to this war go far back in history, though the war itself took place from the 525th to the 537th year of the Age of Conquest. This means it ended about 80 years ago in the current timeline as of the recording of this video. Here are some of the major events associated with the War of Three Dooms. 525. Conflicts between the kingdoms of Jaya escalate into war. Jaya is a realm in the southwestern part of the known world. It is composed of three large kingdoms: Volatile in the west, which is ruled by giants, Alabon in the center, which is ruled by Nagas, and Chakrakoth in the east, which is ruled by Dragonborn. Hostilities between these three states have existed since time immemorial, stretching back far into the Age of Cataclysms, when gods and titans existed physically in the world and battled for dominion. Jaya was a very beautiful land in those days, though it suffered from countless clashes between beings of superior power. Three gods rose to dominance out of these epic battles, with their followers in the eastern, central, and western regions respectively. Rivalries among them worsened until eventually they became enemies and wars ensued. From this history, the three super regions of Jaya evolved, always with bad blood between each other. So when all-out war erupts in the 525th year of the Age of Conquest, it is initially called the Kingdoms' War. The giant-led Volatile and the dragonborn-led Chakrakoth both launch major offensives against each other at the outset of the war. The Naga-led Alabon declares neutrality, but this is little more than a formality. Their long-term goal is to let the giants and the dragonborn wear each other down, then finish them both off. But fighting spills over the borders on both sides, and raids and resource seizures become common. It is not long before Alabon makes counterattacks and begins covert operations in both the east and the west, including magical strikes against critical targets. It is also worth noting that, although this conflict is contained to the realm of Jaya at its outset, there are already a number of allies and enemies in the realms outside of Jaya, particularly in Bazagon and MacLeod, who quickly become involved. This involvement is political, and it's also trade-based in terms of the profit made from supplying resources to the kingdoms of Jaya. As well, a few mercenary companies go to fight in Jaya, seeing it as a war so lucrative as to be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If only they had known just how dreadfully correct they were. 526. The initial development of allabons. The Kingdoms' War has been raging in Jaya for a little over a year at this point, and tensions are increasing on the world stage. The situation is notably volatile in MacLeod, the Great Realm, a large nation to the north and northeastern part of Ichoros. MacLeod is also a land fraught with its own series of wars and conflicts throughout history. House Cantarell of Venselok in eastern MacLeod has long been on diplomatic terms with Fothagal the Dread Blue, an ancient dragon who is the king of the dragonborn nation of Chakrakoth in eastern Jaya. King Sandor Cantarell of Venselok sends mage consuls to the Bronzen Palace of Chakrakoth. They trade arcane secrets with the royal sorcerers of Fothagal and begin the clandestine development of allabons, magical superweapons with the potential for godlike devastation. Not only is Venselok interested in claiming dominance in MacLeod, but they have learned that House Alexi of Kostroma in southern MacLeod, together with House Alterox of Vanjagash in northwestern MacLeod, are also in the early stages of developing allabons. These regions of MacLeod have had long histories of conflict, and House Cantarell is naturally concerned over the prospect of its rivals gaining such an upper hand. House Alexi later goes on to hold similar councils with leaders in Alabon, And House Alterox does the same with leaders in Gorthaelkoth, all striving desperately to find answers to the completion of the Alabons. At the closing of the second year of the Kingdom's War, the conflict shows signs that it will only intensify. Leaders in Magnaland and Jaya are working exhaustively to construct mega artifacts in the hopes of defeating their enemies and achieving victory. They know that they are reaching for unprecedented power, but they cannot imagine the costs that such a victory will entail. As a sidebar, there existed a great mystery for many years after the War of Three Dooms as to how it is that the great houses of Magnaland all had partial knowledge of how to create allabons. The revelation came in the latter phase of the Infernal War, when the archfiend Nergoi managed to merge a region of Hell with a region of Jaya. In his conquest of the world, Nergoi wielded the most powerful allabon ever seen, the Void Star. Indeed, it had been Nergoi, all those years prior, who sold arcane secrets to the Magnalander kings. Powerful, yet incomplete information, and all in part with his infernal machinations. 527. The assassination of King Devesco Alexei of Kostroma. A little over 2 years have passed since the onset of the Kingdom's War. Blood spills across the whole of Jaya, and Magnaland is a tinderbox. It is only a matter of time before the violence spreads. The situation in Bazagon has also grown perilous. The Bazakanon Republic, the Melissus Hold, and the Dwemer Enclave have political and economic ties to Gorthaelkoth in western Jaya. And the Melissus Hold in particular has religious opposition to the dragon kind of Chakrakoth in eastern Jaya. At the same time, the Xanthos Throne and the Argus Legion of Bazagon have ties to the Dragonborn of Chakrakoth. This means that Bazagon City, the jewel of civilization, and the Mecca which holds the highest amount of corpus idols, is ripe for internal and external conflict. The geography of Bazagon is quite particular, which greatly impacts the ways that battles play out there. It is a highly defensible archipelago, and Bazagon City is a metropolis island whose various districts are separated from each other by bewildering labyrinths, thus giving it the moniker City of Mazes. A final realm that needs mentioning is Drekengrim, a temperate to cold island nation in northwestern Ichoros. At this point, there has already been a long-standing conflict in Drekengrim between Amarantha the Merqueen and the rest of the country. Various Drekken leaders have for many years attempted to form alliances with other nations, from Naperna and Magnaland to Bazagon and Gildus, with only limited success. At this point in the timeline, the Merqueen makes contact with King Velis Alterox of Vanjagash in northwestern Magnaland. She has ascertained that House Alterox is attempting to create a new kind of magical weapon, and she offers her aid in exchange for alliance. While no official alliance is formed at this time, a channel of communication is established. Then, on a hot summer's night, while King Devesco Alexei of Kostroma is returning from a private meeting with the King of Casavecchia, an ambush occurs. The attack was orchestrated by House Cantarell and involves a powerful spellcaster who manages to assassinate King Devesco. His 12-year-old son, Gavriel Alexei, is crowned soon after. The people refer to him as the Boy King. Kostroma, with Vanjagash as its ally, formally declares war against Vincelok. Both sides have ties to other powers in Bazagon and Jaya, but neither is aware that the other is developing allabons in secret. Furthermore, Kostroma and its Boy King have no idea that in a secluded sanctum, House Cantarell is constructing a different kind of superweapon, the Colossus. 527. The formation of worldwide alliances. In the ensuing months, war spreads across multiple nations. What once was called the Kingdom's War now becomes the Realms War. Much of the fighting is done by two main sides, the Great Alliance and the Marikinos Accord. So here are the opposing forces in the War of Three Dooms. The Great Alliance is composed of Eastern Jaya, the dragonborn kingdom of Chakrakoth, led by King Fothagal the Dread Blue. In eastern Magnaland, we have Vincelach and its subjects, led by King Sondor Cantarel. In Bazagon, there is the Xanthos throne and the Argus Legion. In Drekengrim, there is Amarantha the Myrrh-Queen and her subjects, and Wraithstone. The Marakinos Accord is composed of Western Jaya, the giant kingdom of Gorthaelkoth, led by King Akhenaten. Southern Magnaland, Kostroma and its subjects, King Gavriel Alexei the Boy King. Northwestern Magnaland, Vanjagash and its subjects, King Velas Alterax is its leader, who's known as the Worm King. In Bazagon, there's the Bazakanon Republic, the Malesis Hold, and the Dwemer Enclave. In Drekengrim, there's the Silver Citadel, Sumnerfield, Rockness, Osterwarden, and Norgal's Rock. There are also some third-party forces in the War of Three Dooms that need to be mentioned. Most of all, Central Jaya, the Naga kingdom of Albali Koth, who fights against both Eastern and Western Jaya. There's also Hebu Town, which holds neutrality, thus it's spared from the fighting and the Alabons. Many Jai flee here during the conflict. As well, there's the Chaste Redoubt, which also holds neutrality, and also is spared from the fighting in the Alabons. It's also worth mentioning the geography. Both Hebu Town and the Chaste Redoubt are very fringe, secluded locations. In Bazagon, there are a couple third-party factions worth mentioning. There's the Vixfoy Carnival, who opportunistically exploits the warring factions, and the Horned Ones, the Minotaur clans who sporadically fights against the other warring factions. In Drekengrim, there are two major third-party forces worth mentioning. Grinadoa, which is a castle town and a very busy port. It remains stubbornly neutral, only fighting against encroaching forces of the Myrrh-Queen on a few occasions. Years later in the war, Grinadoa does join as an ally of Sumnerfield. The other third party in Drekengrim is Ishkadam, who initially declares neutrality and isolationism, but after much pressure, they do end up fighting in alliance with the Myrrh-Queen in 2 battles. Later on in the war, they betray the Myrrh-Queen and end up fighting against her forces in the Isle of Ish region. Battles rage in each theater of war. Ancient grudges flare into bloodshed in Jaya, Magnaland, and Bazagon. In Drekengrim, the Myrrh-Queen and her forces, including contingents of undead, scourge the various folk of the nation. The Realms War already promises to be an event of staggering lethality. Even before the worst of it comes to pass, people have an ominous sense of some impending doom. Sages and soothsayers whisper of blood-chilling portents and of glimpsing a future day that is filled with woeful lamentation. 535. The Colossus of Vincelach. With winter's frost still clinging to the land, the 535th year of the Age of Conquest commences. It commences trembling. Magdalene trembles in a literal sense, for House Cantarel of Vincelach has deployed the Colossus. This wonder of artifice is essentially a construct titan. It is a metal giant that towers over even the tallest of storm giants. A crew operates it from internal chambers, though surprisingly few men are needed. Few, though highly specialized. The Colossus can issue long-range spell-like blasts, though its true power lies in the strength of its limbs and in its indestructible defenses. Many claim that the energy source powering the Colossus is the spirit of a god who is defeated in the Age of Cataclysms. Within its first 3 months, the Colossus topples groves of trees and pulverizes entire towns. Despite Kostroma and Vanjagash's attempts, nothing inflicts any serious damage against the Colossus. Not siege weapons, not spells, and not champions wielding legendary weapons. 536. A decade of war and the collapse of the Bazakanon Republic. More than 10 years have passed since the Realms War began. Many incredible battles occurred during this time, some of which continue to fascinate historians and students of war to this day. At certain times and places, the fighting stalls out, and there is even a brief period in which a potential end to the war is discussed by world leaders. This glimmer of hope quickly fades when the giants of Gorthale Koth achieve a spectacular victory at Mawa Alta, taking the second largest city in the Dragonborn Kingdom. In Bazagon, the Bazakanon Republic suffers from repeated tactical missteps and failures in supply lines, largely due to their cumbersome republic structure. As one of the first peoples of the world of Ichoros, the Bazakanon have a proud ancestry. They have historically been among the strongest forces in the Middle Isles, but the Realms War came at a time in which their society is in an experimental or transitional phase, and a period in which their leaders are uncharacteristically inadequate. These pre-existing destabilizing factors lead to something that no one ever thought possible: the fall of the Bazakanon Republic. Though there are many complexities and variables in the Realms War, a general overview shows us that the Great Alliance is advancing toward victory in Magnaland and Bazagon, while the Marakinos Accord is showing signs of winning in Jaya. In Drekengrim, the United Folk have struck several decisive blows against the forces of the Merqueen, and yet she has lost almost no territory of her own, and her spell-wrought plagues have racked a number of enemy companies and towns. She and her dread captains are also able to make undead soldiers out of the bodies of those they kill, which mitigates the losses she has suffered in other battles. Though the Realms War has gone through stretches of deadlocks, it is also punctuated by intense battles, along with some monumental victories and staggering defeats on all sides. 536. The First Allabons. If history proves anything, it is that mortals are at their worst when they try to be as gods. It is thus with tear-laden eyes that we watch the closing of the 536th year of the Age of Conquest. The first functional allabons are completed by the Dragonborn of Chakra Koth and deployed against the giants of Gorthale Koth. In the Stones of Hongmar region, they unleash Stone Rain, which pulls the rocks from the surface of the land, then flings them back down. This process repeats in intermittent cycles, with the first several volleys able to launch boulders weighing several thousands of pounds each. All structures in the region are demolished except for the very mightiest of constructions built by Grandmaster stone giants, such as the Palace of Akhenaten, the king of Gorthale Koth at this time. The Stone Rain continues to the present day, though it has only enough force now to gather up stones no larger than fist-sized. In Thehebin, the Golden City, the Dragonborn deployed the Alabon Fanged Hurricane, causing a typhoon with wind speeds of up to 330 miles per hour. Not only does this storm wreck the buildings of the city, but gnashing dragon spirits fly upon the winds. Thehebin, the giant's wealthiest settlement, becomes a ruin in the span of a single day. In the Endless Blades grassland of Western Jaya, the Dragonborn unleash Pyroclasm, which causes volcanic eruptions and firestorms throughout the region, destroying most forms of life and blotting out the sky with ash. The giant's food production is greatly diminished from this strike, and wildfires spread for weeks and weeks on end. This region of Jaya is now the Ash Wastes. These attacks are harrowing in their scope and brutality, but the worst is yet to come, for even as these first few Alabons shriek their death knells upon the world, many more are nearing their completion. 537. Widespread deployment of Alabons and the death of Jaya. The final year of the Realms War is a descent into an apocalyptic nightmare for so many. Vincelok, Kostroma, and Vanjigash successfully complete Alabons in Magnaland. House Alterox of Vanjigash also sells 2 Alabons to Amarantha the Merqueen in Drekengrim. House Alexi of Kostroma is unaware of this deal. Gorthale Koth and Albali Koth complete their own Alabons in Jaya, and Chakra Koth finishes more as well. In Magnaland, it takes 2 Alabons to defeat the Colossus of Vincelok at the Battle of Edrita Valley. Shattering Star shoots a magic missile, which instantly splits into 2 missiles, which then double themselves, and the process repeats at such speed that by the time the missiles strike, there are thousands of them. Worldbreaker is an orb that cracks open the ground, swallowing a 2-mile diameter in a deep pit of rubble, with the Colossus buried at the bottom. House Cantarell responds by striking Bay Castle in the contested region of La Curie Est, from which Kostroma's forward offenses are operating. Cantarell activates Ice of Taphocane, creating a storm of supernatural ice that coats whole miles of the land, freezing so bitterly and so deeply that even steel shatters like glass. The waves in Shield Bay turn to ice, trapping ships whose crews turn to statues. Many other allabons are used throughout Magnaland, each more horrifying than the last. The last one is launched by the Sorcerer King Velis Alterox against the city of Vincelock. Tynes of the Netherworld calls up massive spikes from the ground, destroying many of the city's structures. From these colossal spikes emerge worm-like monstrosities that spread throughout Vincelock, killing and devouring any person or beast they come across. All of Magnaland is shocked by this attack. Even to those who are enemies of House Cantarell, Vincelock is one of the 3 great cities of Magnaland, and it stands for Magnalandish culture. Its destruction is felt as a killing of part of the realm's very spirit. Furthermore, there are grave worries that Velis has gone mad in his pursuit of arcane power, and that he will fashion more allabons to use against Kostroma or elsewhere. King Gavril Alexei issues an order that Velis Alterox, his counselors and commanders, all be brought to justice. The Kostroman army is unable to march to Vanjigash, however, as it is soon discovered that much of the realm is covered in thick, supernatural mists, an arcane blight resulting from the allabons. In Drekengrim, the Mer Queen deploys her 2 allabons. She rings the bell of Cran Ulmor, which cracks open and spawns a twisted avatar of the namesake Titan. This colossal, multi-limbed monster resembles a terrifying mockery of a tree folk, and it proceeds to destroy the city of Rockness in the Bevorn Morris region. It then heads westward across the Valling Shelf, racking the land as it goes, and it arrives at the town of Glav. The Archmages of the Silver Citadel engage the avatar of Cranel Moor there, and with the aid of a host of angels that arrives at the holy site, they defeat the Titan. Glav is reduced to ruins before the fighting ends. The Mer Queen's second Alabon shows similarities to Tynes of the Netherworld that Velis Alterox deployed. When ships out of Sumner Field and Grenadoa approach her water castle, she unleashes dread spires. Massive rocks spike up from the ocean floor, sundering most of the enemy ships right away. A few of the spires spew out swarms of tiny, worm-like creatures that latch onto anyone they touch, spreading necrosis and turning the victims into undead. 2 ships manage to escape. One returns to Sumner Field, where the ship is condemned and burned. The other one disappears, with rumors claiming that it crashed at Dens Morris or Dusk Isle, or perhaps was lost at sea, with the entire crew turned to ghoulish undead by the worms. Drekengrim rallies on the whole, and over the next few months, win a number of victories against the forces of the Mer Queen. She and her gruesome allies retreat to her water castle and to Wraithstone. Though the fighting settles down substantially, the conflict does not reach a definitive end, and almost 80 years later, the Mer Queen assaults the land once again. The worst and most tragic destruction of the war, however, takes place in Jaya. Scores of allabons are deployed, far more than in Magnaland. Some have wider-reaching effects than others, but all have cataclysmic consequences. The most lethal of the Jai allabons is Deathwind, sent out by the Dragonborn of Chakrakoth against Albalikoth. This massive, burning wind evaporates the water from flora and fauna, from ground and air. The largest rivers are reduced to trickles. The deepest lakes turn to mud puddles. The heart of the Jaya continent, once beautiful and even lush in areas, becomes a withered desert. The Realm's War concludes and is dubbed the War of Three Dooms. Most life in Jaya has been obliterated, and its regions are reduced to wastelands. About half of all life in Magnaland is eradicated, and large portions of the nation and the Sea of Dreams are left covered in blight mists. This blight does not reach the Bounty of the South/Kostroma region, nor Narwood/Vanjagash. Northeastern Drekengrim experiences extreme environmental effects, and most life there experiences major disturbances. Another effect this war had on the world is how it prompted many migrations of people and also of animals. For example, the city-state of Hebutown in Jaya, which is situated in a secluded, coastal mountain region, remained neutral throughout the realm's war. Its population swelled during the conflict from the amount of refugees fleeing their homes. It is difficult to express just how disastrous this war and its dooms were. Not since the clashes between deities during the Age of Cataclysms has the world seen such devastation. 538. Aftermath. The fighting in Bazagon reached a conclusion not long after the Bazakanon Republic collapsed. The remaining factions each gained some territory and an amount of political power, though the Xanthos throne more than any other. Fortunately for all, no allabons were deployed in Bazagon, though the threat of it was ever present throughout the war. In Magnaland, with House Cantarell annihilated, Houses Alexi and Altorox are clear victors. Tensions quickly rise between the two, with King Gavriel's decree against Velis Altorox and his elite companions, and with so many worrying that the Altorox will continue to create allabons. Velis is a deadly sorcerer king, driven mad by arcane power. A small force of champions are dispatched from Kostroma to an Altorox tomb in the Gnarlwood region, nowadays known as the Barrow of the Worm King. There, these legendary warriors and mages strike down Velis and a number of his top commanders. Kostroman squads arrive by sea in Vanjagash, whereupon a localized conflict ensues. House Altorox and many of their retainers refuse to surrender, fighting to the death in many cases. In the end, Kostroma prevails and House Altorox is wiped out. To this day, the ruler of Vanjagash is not a king, but rather a count who is loyal to the throne of Kostroma. The blight mists lay thick over much of the realm, causing all manner of ills. Some are poisonous gases, others transform people and animals into abominations, and others spirit people away to unknown places. These mists last until the luminous procession in the year 617, when the Keepers of the Silver Flame bring about the reincarnation of Illus the Lantern, who ascends to the sky as a star constellation and burns away the dreadful fog from Magnaland and the Sea of Dreams. The road to Magnaland's recovery and the reclamation of its territories is a long one, and the realm is still struggling. Despite the shadows of the past looming over the folk of the land, there is an ever-present beacon of hope glimmering in the sky each and every night. A final note here is about the existence of allabons nowadays. There are currently no known allabons in Ichoros, according to all major authorities, including the Mithril Emperor himself. All texts that have been discovered, which describe the processes of allabon creation, have been destroyed. Though this does not mean that the search for such texts has concluded. Multiple expeditions are being carried out in Magnaland and Jaya, with scouts, explorers, and relic hunters of all kinds, seeking any potential remnants of these superweapons. Thank you all for watching, and an extra special thank you to everyone who supports me over on Patreon, in particular Lucas Mesmo, Adam Wood, Nick Thy Pirate King, Jared Primont, Locke, Nicholas A., Technicolor Shale, and Robert Brashini. Thank you very much, guys. And if you who are listening here are interested in supporting the channel and getting yourself some great exclusive rewards, make sure to check out the link down in the video description. This is Esper, and I will see you in another video sometime soon. As always, may your adventures be many.